Have you ever had a night's rest that's left you restless? My name is Emma Clarke, and I'm currently the functioning intern for the Pearl Institute here in Waynesville, North Carolina. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the importance of sleep and how it affects our mental health and our nervous system regulation. So come, sit down, and let's chat. Sleep is a powerful tool for our emotional regulation, and then it offers the capacity for our nervous system regulation, because when we're emotionally regulated, we can tap into our nervous system. But when we're not, when everything is just hitting the fan, which it tends to do with sleep deprivation, then we're in a place where we don't regulate ourselves in the same way. Our amygdala is making the choices, and we're deregulated in a way that's not sustainable. Within the conversation of sleep relating to our nervous system, there are many side effects of sleep that directly contribute to being able to regulate our nervous system at a higher capacity, such as emotional regulation. Without emotional regulation, it's harder for us to tap into our nervous system. When our amygdala, our fight or flight system, is making all of the choices, it's harder for us to actually step back, regulate ourselves, and make decisions from a place that isn't standing within activation. And so when we get better sleep, we have better control over ourselves, over our emotional processes, over our nervous system, and over how we live our daily lives. There are many key functions of why sleep is beneficial for us as human beings. It's an opportunity to build and strengthen new neural pathways. There's also an opportunity to participate in emotional processing, where we have the opportunity to actually understand and put into long-term memory what's occurring in our days and the memories that are infiltrating our minds. And also the space to detoxify our brain and get rid of proteins and matter that might not be needed within the space any longer, and is better for us to work through so that we can bring new things into our brain. So within sleep, we actually have the opportunity to form and strengthen new neural pathways within our brain. This is essential and really important for us as human beings because it allows for us to create new trains of thinking, new ways of creativity, and new ways of processing. In terms of our emotional processing, sleep is wonderful because it helps us to actually translate our memories and interactions in our daily life into long-term processing, habit formation, and just memory in general. Hitting stages like REM sleep within our sleep process is highly important because it allows for our brain to participate in things like detoxification, which is where our brain actually interacts with our glymphatic system, and it's sort of like taking out the trash of our mind, where we get rid of proteins and things that reside within it that are no longer needed for our processing or just daily functioning. So when we participate in sleep, especially some of the deeper parts of it like REM sleep, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this episode, we actually allow our brain to go through waste removal of things that no longer serve us or need to be there. So I've just mentioned REM sleep within our conversation, and I think next it would be important to talk about the different stages of sleep and what specifically REM sleep is. REM sleep refers to rapid eye movement, which talks about the deep sleep that we hit after going through initial stages of sleeping. Let's talk about those stages. The three initial stages of sleep is referred to as NREM, where we experience light sleep, intermediate sleep, and deep sleep. The final stage of our sleeping process is when we hit REM sleep, which contributes to our emotional processing and memory consolidation. When we get into the stages of sleep, let's talk about what these look like and what our body participates within in each one. So the first stage of NREM is our light sleep. Your body's fluctuating in and out of falling asleep and being awake. Our muscles start to relax, and we're sort of just prepping ourselves for those deeper stages of sleep and the comfortability that we'll find within that. So it's interesting, in these initial stages, we don't see much processing or much interaction going on actually with the brain participating in some of those key functions that we've laid out earlier. So within stage 2 of NREM, we're hitting intermediate sleep. And what's interesting about this is that the body actually starts to regulate its rhythm. We see a little bit of that emotional processing turn on, and we're hitting the first initial stages of reaching the deep sleep. Our heart rate starts to decrease, that deep relaxation is really setting in. And once we've hit that intermediate stage and the body's really starting to relax and flow with that sleep, once moving through the intermediate stage of sleep, we reach stage 3. which is deep sleep, also known as slow wave sleep or delta sleep. And this is where we see a little bit of physical restoration coming online, muscle regrowth, and immune system boosting. Additionally, we also see that there's some brain detoxification that occurs as the brain will start to remove some of the metabolic waste that resides within it. Last but not least within our stages of sleep is REM sleep, which refers to rapid eye movement. Within this, our brain activity actually increases and dreaming starts to occur. We have the opportunity to participate in deeper processes that relate to our emotions and the consolidation of them, and surrounding our memory as well. Additionally, an interesting part about this part of sleep is the fact that our body becomes physically paralyzed so that we don't act out our dreams and what's occurring within our minds. But on the latter side of this, we actually see that brain activity remains what it would look like when we're awake and functioning. Interesting, right? When we talk about the process of sleep and getting an appropriate amount of sleep, we must remember that this is highly individualized. Sleep varies depending on age and person. People who are younger sometimes depend on more sleep, whereas people who are older sometimes need less. But the productivity that sleep provides never varies. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the impacts that poor sleep can have on our body functioning and overall mental health. We've talked a lot about some of the benefits that it can occur, but disruptions in sleep can also lead to some negative outcomes. When we talk about the impacts of poor sleep on mental health and emotional regulation, there's a really interesting study that was actually done by an individual named Dr. Matthew Walker, who alludes to the fact that sleep deprivation can increase our amygdala activation by 60%. This is important in the conversation in terms of how sleep affects our mental health because our amygdala is our fight or flight center. It's what tells us how to respond to emotional stimuli around us, whether that's positive or negative. And so what this study pretty much says is that for individuals undergoing sleep deprivation, they're seeing a 60% increase in their amygdala activation to emotional stimuli and response. And so people who are sleep deprived are actually quicker to become triggered and activated to the stimulus around them, when in fact, it might not need a negative response. It's just because we're tired. Another really interesting part of this study done by Dr. Matthew Walker was the fact that well-rested individuals were showing a stronger neural connection between the medial prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, which actually contributes to us making better regulated emotional responses and just forethinking in terms of the stimuli occurring around us. An additional study that's really interesting to look at that actually parallels the one done by Dr. Matthew Walker is one done by Ide and colleagues, also focusing on the effects of sleep deprivation and regulation within individuals. In this image here, we can actually see a tracer chemical that has been put into the brain, and it's showing up as red. What we should focus on is the difference in red between the individuals who are sleep deprived and the individuals who have a full night's rest. Within the individuals who are undergoing sleep deprivation, there's actually more of the tracer chemical left behind, more red. And why this is because the brain's not participating in those detoxification and processing practices because it doesn't have the time. Whereas when we look at the individuals who actually are participating in the full functioning process of sleep, we see the difference. There's less red, there's more emotional detoxification, and just metabolic detoxification systems within the brain overall. Another really interesting part of this study done by Ide and colleagues that relates to the graphic that we have up currently is the fact that once this tracer chemical builds up, it's actually an allusion to proteins building up within our mind. People who undergo sleep deprivation no longer have the lymphatic system coming into play as much. So we're not going through the process of brain detoxification, we're actually going through a process of brain buildup. A really interesting part of what Ide and colleagues allude to within the process of these proteins building up within our brain is that it down the line can contribute to neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. So we've talked about some of the negative outcomes that can come from sleep deprivation and not getting the right amount of sleep. So let's talk about how we actually set ourselves up for good sleep and what that looks like. Part of creating a really positive environment for sleep is actually making the place that you sleep comfortable, making your bed somewhere that you want to go to, making your pillow a safe place to fall. Another important part is actually cutting out screens and technology. There's a lot of research that shows that blue light emitted by screens actually disrupts our sleep and disrupts our ability to reach full potentials that REM, rapid eye movement, stages of sleep offer. In terms of creating good sleep environments, it's important to avoid stimulants if you can. Things like caffeine and nicotine right before bed don't really help us reach the deep stages of sleep as often as we would if we weren't participating with these stimulants. One of the last parts of regulating our sleep and creating a good routine within it is actually creating a relaxing bedtime regime. If you're running around 30 minutes before you're trying to get into bed, doing things around the house, it might not be an easy thing for your body to just lay down and start the process of sleep. And so creating a routine for yourself to fall into and lay back within and rest and relax, prepping for sleep actually makes the process a lot easier. Building a healthy sleep routine is vital, but accessibility within this conversation is also very important to consider. Making small changes might be a great place to start at first, or just a great place to start in general. Whatever you have the accessibility to do, why not try? But don't hold yourself accountable for things that are outside of your scope and outside of your reach. If you're unable to change things like the way your mattress feels, try with smaller things, like how much screen time you're participating with before bed. Consistent sleep routines are essential, and finding what works for you within that is one of the most important parts. Make it individualized, make it comfortable, and make it something that you're excited to participate within. In this episode today, we've talked a lot about the benefits of sleep, like emotional processing, memory consolidation, and how it contributes to our overall brain health. We've also talked about some of the negative side effects of not getting enough sleep or participating in sleep deprivation. Sleep is highly important for our functioning as human beings and contributes to our emotional processing, cognition, and memory building. Sleep helps us to go through processes of detoxification within the brain, getting rid of things like proteins that no longer serve us. When looking back at the study that we talked about earlier, Ide and colleagues, when we don't participate in these processes of detoxification, the proteins actually build up, leaving us at greater risk for things like Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases. This ties deep lines to the fact that sleep is important for us in our daily functioning. Consistent, restorative sleep is one of the greatest things that we can do for our mental health and overall well-being. Accessibility, like talked about earlier within our conversation, is important to keep in mind, but making a routine that is individualized can oftentimes help within this endeavor. E. Joseph Kosman has a lovely quote that says, "The best bridge between hope and despair is a good night's rest." And I think that this helps to tie up our episode well for today. Consistent regulatory sleep is one of the best things that we can do for ourselves, our mental well-being, and overall projected health. Accessibility is a conversation to keep in mind within this process, but creating something that is highly individualized to you will be the most sustained way to participate in sleep in a beautiful, beneficial practice.
Thank you for watching, and please remember to like this video and to subscribe to our channel.
For more information or to make a donation towards our cause, please visit our website.